My dear brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, today we have entered the 25th ordinary Sunday of the year. For today's reflection, we have the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 20, verses 1 to 16. The title of the passage is The Workers in the Vineyard or the Laborers in the Vineyard. We all know the background of this particular passage, where the last will be the first and the first will be the last. This is what the message that Jesus wants to teach us, and he wanted to teach his own disciples and his own followers. Now, when we take this passage, we need to understand various terms like just or justice, terms like grace or gracious, terms like mercy or merciful, terms like forgiveness or forgiver, and various other terms like there is no one to hire us. Who are these people to be hired? These terms we need to understand in order to understand this passage rightly and thoroughly. Now, this passage we see verse 3, the landowner going out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, "You two go into my vineyard, and I will give you what is just." Then, like that, he goes on various hours, and he finds people standing idle, and he asks them to go into his own vineyard and work. Now, verse 8, it says, when it was evening, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Summon the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and ending with the first." Here the problem begins. The foreman should have called the laborers who came first to work and should have paid them and should have sent them. But instead of calling the first who came to work, is calling the person who came the last and paying them. And it created curiosity in the laborers, because they are thinking that they would receive more. According to verse 10, they are thinking that they would receive more because they were called first to work. And therefore, when something unexpected is taking place, they try to grumble against the landowner, saying in verse 12, "These last ones worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who bore the day's burden and the heat." Now here the problem comes. The persons who came last made equal with the person who came first. Now, persons belonging to lower status brought up to the status of the higher persons who are higher in position, problem starts. This is what we need to study and understand in this passage. What Jesus is trying to teach, and what he wants to tell who God is really. He is trying to tell God is gracious, God shows grace, God is merciful, and wants to show mercy to whomever he wishes, and God is ready to forgive, and he shows forgiveness. And this is what we need to study here. What is now Jesus is telling about justice, just like the Old Testament. An eye for eye, a tooth for tooth. A person deserves a punishment for what he has done. That's what we see in our present world. When a student is punished or a sinner is punished, we say that he deserves because he has done such a unforgettable thing and unforgivable thing. Therefore, he deserves to be punished. So, justice is what one deserves when he gets, that is justice. But what is grace? Grace is one does not deserve, he does not merit, but he deserves what is unmeritorious to oneself, or he gives to one person who does not really deserve it, especially a position or a status or upliftment. So when all these things takes place, people naturally feel envy. Envy is what? When someone who is a sinner or who is unqualified or who doesn't deserve it is brought to the status or the level of a person who is in a high rank or who is in authority. For an example, in India, we have the reservation policy. The high class people never and ever supported this reservation policy because they are always against it. Why? Because it brings the lower status people to their level. We are seeing it in our naked eyes. 2 days before, in India, the MPs marched forward towards the new Parliament House, where before they entered, they asked a person to hoist the flag, not by the President of India, but by the Vice President of India. Why? Because she comes from a lower status. She comes from a tribal community. And therefore, she was not considered equal to the members of the parliament. Though, according to the constitution, she is the first citizen and the head of the state. But she is denied so many rights. Why? Because she comes from a lower community, lower status, and therefore when she comes in bar with the equal status people, the high rank people are not ready to accept it. Same thing, this parable can be compared to the life of Jonah. Jonah chapter 4 verses 1 to 4, where Jonah is telling, but this was greatly displeasing to Jonah and he became angry. I beseech you, Lord, he prayed, is not this what I said while I was still in my own country? This is why I fled at first to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and merciful God, slow to anger, rich in clemency, loath to punish. And now, Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. But the Lord asked, have you reason to be angry? Here we can see Jonah wants people to be punished, and therefore he is angry with God. And he cannot see God's graciousness, mercifulness, his act of forgiving. For him it is like untouchability. And therefore he is telling that these people deserve punishment. Why should they be forgiven? When they are forgiven, for him it is very difficult to accept. Envy is the same thing. When Abel was doing well, his brother Cain felt envy of him and killed him. Same thing happened with Saul. When David was coming up, Saul could not bear that. And therefore he tried many times to kill him. And therefore envy is a thing which cannot see someone coming up. Especially people from lower status, those who the society considers untouchables, and the society thinks as sinners. Society thinks that they are unmeritorious people, and therefore when these people come up, the society feels that they should not deserve to come to the equal status. When people come to equal status because of God's grace, God's mercy, God's forgiveness, God's graciousness, they feel they don't deserve. Same thing can be applicable to all traditional Christians. We Catholics can feel, or we devout Christians can feel, and we religious people can feel. We fathers and sisters and religious brothers can feel at times when laypersons are raised to a higher standard or given a position, taking a priest away or taking a nun away from your position and given your position, though according to our ways of thinking, maybe they are unmeritorious, they don't deserve it. But due to the graciousness of God, due to the mercy of God, due to the forgiving nature of God, they can be given. And therefore only here in verse 7, because no one has hired us, because the society has not thought about them. The society did not feel that these people should be given a proper status. They should be also uplifted. They should be also given a position in the world. And they should be recognized. And when recognition and position are given, naturally those who deserve it feel envy of it. But Jesus wants to teach us our envy should not in no way interfere in the practice of God's grace. God's grace goes to a person who doesn't deserve it. God's generosity goes to a person who does not deserve it at all. God is generous enough to give His grace to anyone, show His mercy to anyone, forgive anyone. That's why when the good thief, just wanted to be remembered when Jesus comes in His heaven, but Jesus readily on the spot gave him the heaven. Today you will be with me in the paradise. Similarly, He showed His mercy and forgiveness to Zacchaeus, who just because Jesus said, I will dine with you today, he came, and immediately before Jesus could talk to him, to explain to him what is his real life, he is a sinner, he is a tax collector, he is a traitor, he is a collaborator in the sinful acts. But Jesus did not say all those things. But when he was ready to come down from his sinful status, Jesus showed him greatest mercy and told him, he too is son of Abraham. Yes, whoever is living on this earth are sons and daughters of Abraham. They are children of God. God is merciful towards even the hardest sinner. Even the greatest sinner, when he turns towards God, God is ready to forgive. Though he may not deserve it, he may not merit that forgiveness, he may not merit that mercy that God is trying to show towards him. But God is great. God is great, and He has all the wealth, all the mercy, all the talents and qualities to forgive a sinner. And therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, when we meditate upon this passage, let us learn from this passage and let us become like God. Let us become gracious. Let us become merciful. Let us become generous. Let us become forgiver of sins. When we do all these things, we can come out of our envy, jealousy, and we become one with, equal with God. God on His own merit, but we on our unmerit can come together in terms with God. We can stand at the side of God because of God's graciousness, God's forgiveness, God's mercy. Amen.